Some people crumble in the face of death, but not those who have a real faith, a God-given faith. All right, let's look at Isaac. Verse 20, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding things to come. The operative phrase here is things to come. Abraham had not received the promise, and the promise of God given to Abraham originally in the Abrahamic covenant is reiterated to his son Isaac, but Isaac does not receive the promise either. Abraham had been promised the land, the nation, the spiritual blessings to the world. He never saw any of it at all. He didn't die in despair, however. Abraham died in faith, confidently passing on the promise to his son Isaac, knowing Isaac would be the next step in the divine plan that would lead ultimately to fulfillment. Isaac does the same thing, passes it to Jacob. Jacob does the same thing, passes it to Joseph. They all knew that God was faithful. That's what believers know. They were believers and they knew it. In the language of Hebrews 10:23, he who promised is faithful. God can be trusted. Now, I think you are kind of struck by the fact that you had quite a section on Abraham there, but you just have one verse on Isaac. We would like to have a lot more information here. It would be easy for us if there was some given in this location. However, the writer assumes that everybody who's a Hebrew reader of this letter knows the story of Isaac because it is such a familiar story to all Jewish people. But since you're not Jewish people, some of you are, but the majority of you are not, and since you may not remember the story in the Old Testament, you may not be familiar with it, we would do well to go back and kind of take another look at the story of Isaac and see how his faith manifested itself. And I will promise you this, if you'll stick with me on this journey, it will be extremely encouraging to you. Isaac lived the longest of the four patriarchs. He lived longer than Abraham, longer than Jacob, and longer than Joseph. But less is recorded about him than any of the others. Basically, his life is squeezed into Genesis 25, 26, and 27. Now, in summing up Isaac, we can say this: he was not spectacular. Someone has suggested that he was an ordinary son of an extraordinary father who became the ordinary father of an extraordinary son, which is another way of saying he was a not-so-extraordinary guy sandwiched between two extraordinary people, Abraham and Jacob. He lived a relatively quiet life and was probably best known for his spiritual weakness and his somewhat passive nature. Let's go back to Genesis 26. The story is certainly worth telling, and it will be a greatly encouraging story for you, because if this man, with all of his weakness, is in the list of the heroes of faith, guess what? There's hope for us. That's what's encouraging. Now, there's a lot of ways to kind of start the story, but let's pick up the story in chapter 26 and verse 1. There was a famine in the land. That's in the land of Israel, land of Canaan. It's not yet belonging to Israel. There is no nation yet. They're not going to come back there till 40 years after 400 years of exile in Egypt. There's a famine in the land where the family of Abraham is nomadic living, and they have to go somewhere else to get some food. So Isaac, who was now an adult, went to Gerar. Now, Gerar was not a really good place to go because Gerar was a Philistine city sitting on the border of Egypt. Right on the border of Egypt. And Egypt was not a good place to be. So the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you." You know, this is a sort of a concession on God's part. You shouldn't even get that close to Egypt. But if you're going to be in Gerar, stay there. Don't go beyond that place. Verse 3, sojourn in this land, and I'll be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And here he repeats to Isaac the Abrahamic covenant. I'll multiply your descendants as stars of heaven. I'll give your descendants all these lands. To your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So here is the reiteration of the Abrahamic covenant to Isaac, who's the next in line in the generations that will be the source of the fulfillment of the covenant. Isaac was obedient. Verse 6, he lived in Gerar. He never went across the border. So in one sense, that is commendable, that he stopped at the border and didn't go where God told him not to go. However, his weakness showed up immediately. Verse 7, when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say, "my wife," thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. Where did he learn to conduct himself like that? From his dad is right, from his father, from Abraham. Abraham did it twice. Genesis 12 records that he did it, and then he did it again in Genesis 20. Abraham was afraid that somebody was going to take Sarah away from him, because Sarah was also very beautiful, and there was a famine in the land. Genesis 12:10, Abram goes down to Egypt. He goes past Gerar all the way to Egypt. He says to his wife, verse 11 of Genesis 12, "See now, I know you're a beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see me, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they'll kill me, and they'll let you live. Please say that you're my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you." Guess what? I want you to say you're my sister so they can do anything they want to you without killing me. Oh, nice. Chivalry at its finest. Are you kidding? Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh. The woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. Something bad went on there. You don't give all that stuff unless you get something in exchange. The Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you've done to me? Why don't you tell me she's your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So that I took her for my wife. Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go." That is one of the